So the Tomb Raider games were a massive success in terms of sales, but around the time Chronicles was released, people were starting to get sick of the same tired old formula that was used for every installment up until that point. In order to win the fans back, Core had finally decided to do something different with the series by making Tomb Raider the Angel of Darkness. That was supposed to not only bring back life to the beloved franchise, but also to make good use of the PlayStation 2's hardware. Core decided to split up into two separate teams. One team would work on Tomb Raider Chronicles, and the other would work on Angel of Darkness. Unfortunately, after the release of Chronicles, almost everything in the development stage was scrapped because Eidos simply thought that the PS2 wouldn't be able to handle what they had in mind, which means Core had to start from scratch. After 2 more years of development, Eidos thought that the game would get more publicity if it coincided with the second Tomb Raider movie, The Cradle of Life, so the game got delayed again to spring 2003. But then Core started suffering from numerous setbacks which caused them to delay the game once more. Angel of Darkness was finally released in the summer of 2003, still managing to make it in time for the release of Cradle of Life. So for a game that's been hyped the crap out of and postponed a few times, this must have meant that Core was focusing the hell out of making this the best Tomb Raider game ever made. I mean, it was a new era of gaming, the PlayStation 2 was a couple years old at this point, it had some huge potential. Well, when the game was finally released, was it any fun? Well, it was. And Tomb Raider The Angel of Darkness was absolutely slammed by critics and hated by even the most die-hard of fans. It did almost nothing right. I mean, it certainly evolved the series, but it made some of the dumbest decisions you could possibly do to the franchise. Surely it can't be that bad, right? I mean, if Core's been making the same game like 5 times before this, then you probably think they'd do it again here, right? Well, let me prove you wrong by introducing you to Tomb Raider The Angel of Darkness. Okay, for once I'm actually not going to go into too much detail with the story, for reasons which I will explain later. So in the opening cutscene, we see that Lara has reunited with her former mentor, Werner von Croy. You know, that creepy old guy from the last Revelation who apparently thinks that Lara is a valuable asset. Anyway, she meets von Croy in his apartment in Paris, where he requests that she searches for 5 obscura paintings, whatever those are, as he needs them to give to a client called Eckhart. However, von Croy has somehow learned that Eckhart is a bit of a loony and plans to use the paintings for evil doings. Ooh, I may use these paintings for world domination, along with my good friends Picasso and Van Gogh! Unfortunately, Lara refuses to help because she's still mad at von Croy for leaving her in Egypt after last Revelation. Wait, what?
Egypt, Werner. You walked away and left me.
What was that I said about Tomb Raider Chronicles in the last video? However, Werner von Creepy is still excavating where she last was in hope of her living. Newsflash, lady, he didn't leave you! Even though he was up against you in last Revelation, he still had the decency to try as hard as he could to find you again. And you're actually going to go out of your way and despise him just because you assumed he left you? You selfish broad! So anyway, after Lara rejects von Croy's offer unnecessarily angrily, he pushes her out of the way, knocking her out, and all while gunshots are fired. When Lara recovers, we see that von Croy has been murdered. Gee, people aren't going to think it was Lara who killed him, right? Of course they do. The police track the source of the gunshots and go after Lara while she tries to evade them. The rest of the story from here on basically just involves you figuring out who really killed von Croy and stop Eckhart using the paintings to awaken a creature called the Sleeper, the last member of the Nephilim race. And that's as much as I can summarize the story. It may sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I honestly had to look up a wiki to make any lick of sense out of the story. And even then, I only barely understood what was going on because there are so many plot points in this game. What is the Nephilim race anyway? Why is this Cabal group helping Eckhart? Who are the Luveratati? Answers, please! Alright, we'll get back to the story later. For now, let's actually have a look at the gameplay. And holy hell is it broken! If you can believe it, they actually made the controls worse. To put it simply, Lara's movement is incredibly sluggish and there are way too many animations that bring the pace to a constant halt. That's kind of the best I can put the controls. It's really hard to explain how Lara handles in this game, so basically just try to imagine the controls in the other games, except now you have to do it at like 5 miles per hour. I'm not kidding when I say there are a lot of animations in this game. Core has tried, and failed miserably I might add, to create a more realistic feel to the game, like checking through doors, cupboards, and having Lara's legs carry a lot of momentum when she's grabbing onto a ledge. This doesn't sound bad at first, but when you have to watch the same animation over and over and over and over again, it just slows down the game to almost no degree. Take the climbing on the ledges for example. As mentioned before, Lara's legs will keep swinging when you grab onto a ledge. Again, this doesn't sound terrible, but here's the catch. You can't climb up until you see every frame of this stupid and unnecessary animation. And this happens every single time you grab onto a ledge. Even with the tiniest of jumps, you still have to watch this damn animation play. I can imagine that this game would be roughly around 4 or 5 hours shorter if the animations were simple and quick. But nope, Core has to pad this game out as much as possible. Going back to the controls, this may seem like a minor issue, but I thought it'd be worth mentioning anyway. The jump and the roll buttons are swapped. In the other games, it was always square to jump and circle to roll. But in Angel of Darkness, it's circle to jump and square to roll. This throws you off tremendously if you play the other games first. Why change what's already been implemented into our brains for 5 games now? In what way is that logical? I mean, you can change the controls if you wish, but may I ask, what game uses circle to jump besides maybe Kingdom Hearts? As well as this, you also have to hold down R1 to aim and press the action button to shoot, which I guess doesn't sound too bad because it's essentially the same as Resident Evil, but I honestly wouldn't know how it feels because I'm playing off of the PC version. The game itself plays like your average Tomb Raider adventure. You explore everywhere, do some platforming, side jump like Lara's on the moon, solve a lot of puzzles, and avoid various traps. The music, while not particularly catchy, still sounds okay to listen to, and the graphics actually look pretty damn good for a slightly early PS2 game. But what the hell has happened to Lara's feet? It looks like she turned into the penguin. Thankfully, the acting is still pretty good too, although this guy Bouchard's voice kinda concerns me.
I know who does. Daniel Rennes works out of the pawnbrokers on the corner of the Rue Saint-Marc and Cour la Seine.
Would somebody just get me a throat lozenge already?
Sadly, those are the only good things I can say about this game, because in addition to god-awful controls, the gameplay is extremely tedious. You have no idea how many times I had to look up a walkthrough because of either checking to see if I'm near the end, really not caring and just wanting to get through the game as quickly as possible, or having to solve an insanely cryptic puzzle. Take this part in the archaeological dig where I had to open a large circular door. Usually to figure out where to go next, you can get an extremely vague hint from Von Croy's notebook that you get early in the game. However, for this one certain puzzle, you have to know to go to the very back of the notebook, and then you'll get a picture that serves as a guide. Well, how the hell were you supposed to figure that out? Did the developers just assume that the players would scan through the entire notebook and expect them to memorize everything? That's terrible design, Core. Terrible, terrible design. Quite a few new things have been added to Lara's moveset, one of which is the ability to sneak up on your enemies and knock them out. What is this, Tomb Raider or Metal Gear freaking Solid? Besides, sneaking is entirely pointless because not only is it just easier to shoot the enemies, but the AI is also incredibly dumb. Yo, dude, over here. Booga 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 booga. There are also moments in the game where you have the choice of what to say in various conversations, which at first you think will change how the characters feel about you and make alterations to the story. And it does do that. One time. Yep, only one time in the whole game does choosing what you say actually make a difference. There are even times where Lara speaks out the option you didn't choose anyway, so what's the point of picking what you say in the conversations aside from this one part? It just wastes your time, and once again, unnecessarily pads out the game. There's no reason for these choices to be here. But the most bullshit addition to the Tomb Raider series is the strength system. This is where the game tries to use a sort of RPG aspect by having Lara perform the most mundane of tasks in order for her to become stronger and do things that you swear to God she was able to do naturally in the other games. Take the section in the beginning of the game where you have to pull this block in order to jump and reach for a ledge. We know for a fact that Lara can grab a block without the need for upper body strength, and we could already assume that she does a lot of exercise in her mansion. But as for this game, in order to move this one block, we had to improve our strength by going through a door. Are you f***ing serious? I'm no gymnast, but I'm pretty sure this is not the way to build up muscles. I mean, that'd be pretty handy, but unfortunately, life isn't that simple. There's even a moment near the end of the game where you gain lower body strength by jumping. Really? Being a platformer, you've been doing like a bajillion jumps at this point. But as soon as you do this one jump, your legs will suddenly become stronger? That's not the way it works, lady. And besides, you should already be an overall strong character. Tell me, what's your excuse for suddenly becoming so weak in this game?
I'm not strong enough.
Oh, well, that just sums it up then, doesn't it? Though that still would be pretty awesome if you could do that in real life. Hey Josh, do you think you can get me a glass of water? Oh yeah, sure thing. Okay, here you go. Oh, thanks man. Oh, well dude, how did you get so ripped? What are you talking about? Oh, right. I just walked through the door. Nice.
But aside from that ridiculous gimmick, the environments are also unimpressive to look at, and the level formations are just downright horrible. And sometimes they could just be outright bizarre for a Tomb Raider game.
Yeah, because if there's one thing that comes to mind in the Tomb Raider game, it's a sweet rave party.
There are many times in these levels where it becomes unclear as to what you can interact with and what you can't. Like, how about these vines that are just flat against the wall? You would think those are just for decoration, right? Well, as it turns out, you can actually climb onto those vines to reach certain places that you couldn't before. Well, how about making it more three-dimensional so I can at least tell that you have to use those vines in some significant way? But even when you come across the one tomb, count it, one tomb that this game has to offer, it's still a huge pain to get through. It goes for one of those overly done gimmicks where you have to collect stones based on certain elements that are the keys to progression. And then afterwards you gotta climb up to the top of the tomb and obtain one of the obscura paintings, guarded by one of the most annoying bosses I've ever encountered in a video game. There's no way to kill the bastard, and every time you get close to the obscura painting, he moves it to another statue. Turns out you're actually supposed to keep shooting at this fan thing until you can vaguely tell that he's dazed, and you have literally mere seconds to get to the painting before he moves it again. That's not all though. Even after collecting the painting, you'd think there'd be some way to defeat him, right? Wrong. You're supposed to ignore the guy and forget that there's even a threat in the room.
Jesus Christ, I know the other Tomb Raider games have had their fair share of cryptic moments, but this is just stupid.
But lastly, I'm not a fan of Lara herself. Because of the darker and more serious tone, Cora's completely changed her personality, and that's not a good thing. She just comes across as a total bitch to every person she sees. Like, look how Lara reacts to this cafe owner after receiving a possession of his from the nightclub.
Did everything go okay?
It's quiet in here. Your voice really carries.
Well, now what was that for? He was being nice by asking if you were okay. What's with the sudden need to be snarky all the time? So yeah, this is not the Lara Croft we come to know throughout the past 5 games. You could probably argue she wasn't that well developed in the PlayStation games either, which yeah, I would probably agree with, because she seemed kind of overly tough and really tried to cram the idea in your head that she was a woman and she didn't care if she was. But at least Samus didn't need to speak in order for her to be a badass. Well, at least until Metroid Other M, where they totally threw that idea out the window. But Lara Croft does not need to be this bitchy to make herself seem cool. If anything, this makes her more unlikable. Well, let's try to move on from that and continue on with the story. Lara manages to find Eckhardt's base and searches around for him. But we eventually get trapped by a man who's been following us since the beginning of the game, known as Curtis Trent, who for the next couple of levels we actually get to play as him. Oh, I'm sorry, I seem to have put in my copy of Silent Hill. Curtis controls exactly like Lara does, except I think he may be a bit slower than her. That and he's able to... Well, what is he doing exactly? Scavenging around the room with his mind? Is he a psychic? What? Well, anyway, with his power, he's able to look for clues that might help him along the way. Mostly key codes opening a door, though. Curtis will come across numerous psychopaths to break out of their cells, and at the end of his second level, he'll need to destroy this... I don't know, something called a Proto-Nephilim. These levels are actually not that bad. If you can accept the fact that it has absolutely nothing to do with Tomb Raider, Curtis's levels are fairly enjoyable. Not perfect, but fairly enjoyable. Its survival horror aspect reminds me a lot of the Resident Evil games, and that's definitely a good thing. But sadly, we do eventually have to go back to playing as Lara again. Before that though, Curtis tells her that Eckhart is a black alchemist that is somehow immortal, and the only way to kill him is by piercing 3 of these specific shards into him. I don't know. I gave up trying to make out the story a long time ago. Afterwards, the two split up, with Lara going after the last obscura painting, while Curtis tries to nab the last shard that was stolen by Eckhart. Once Lara obtains the painting and heads to Eckhart, she immediately has to give it away in exchange for Curtis's life. But, big shock, Eckhart was going to kill them anyway, by means of feeding them to a creature known as Boss, who used to be a human working for Eckhart until she told him that she hadn't disposed of the Proto-Nephilim that Curtis had to face. Thus, he pushed her into a monstrous plant mutant thing and forms into the third boss fight. A boss fight, if you will. Once again, we control Curtis and we have to destroy all of Boss's gooey pods. Now this isn't quite as bad as the first fight, but don't be surprised if you quickly can't figure out what to do. Like the earlier games, when shooting, you're automatically locked onto the enemy. But you'll never guess as to how to change targets. By pressing the roll button. The f***ing roll button. Now I don't mean to be picky, but please God tell me, why would you think to press the roll button to change targets? What if you wanted to quickly turn around or dodge a high attack? You wouldn't be able to do that then because you'd just be switching to another enemy.
Think!
But anyway, Boss actually has a second form, which is pathetically easy. But unfortunately, while killing her, Curtis is stabbed and falls dead to the floor. Turning our attention back to Lara, now owning 2 of the shards to defeat Eckhart, she investigates his lab to find the 3rd shard and afterwards comes across the chamber where the sleeper is held. Now we finally get to the last battle against Eckhart, which is also pretty damn easy, if you know what you're doing. Oh, what? Like waiting for him to split into 3, coming into the force field, forming back into 1, and then punching him to somehow create the illusion that you're piercing one of the shards into his body? Wasn't that hard to figure out? And you gotta do this 3 times. Yes, Eckhart, continue using the same strategy that failed twice already. I mean, 3rd time's the charm, right? Nope, after kicking him out of existence, we see that Lara is just about to— her eyes have suffered from glitchitis! Anyway, she's just about to stab Eckhart with the final shard, until his right-hand man— yeah, he has one of those now, who takes the shard from Lara and stabs Eckhart himself. It turns out that his name is Corell by the way, is not only the last survivor of the Nephilim race, who can apparently shapeshift, but has also been helping Lara in familiar forms like Curtis, and is the murderer of Von Croy. So this random guy who we don't see until the very end of the game is not only the last existing of an endangered race, but also Werner Von Croy's killer? How does he know Werner? Why did he need Eckhart to fulfill his plan? Why does he specifically need the Sleeper to recreate the Nephilim race? Questions which will never be answered. So Corell plans to continue waking up the Sleeper, and it's up to Lara to get rid of him. As soon as she climbs to the top, she uses Eckhart's magical glove to get rid of the Sleeper and cause a ray of light to kill Corell, eradicating the Nephilim race. After that, Lara finds Curtis's blade weapon, walks into the shadows, and the game takes you back to the title screen. No credits sequence, no special thanks, no continuation to the anticlimactic ending. Jeez, Core, I mean I'm grateful, but you could have shown some appreciation to the staff.
Well, maybe it was for the best, because I, for one, would not want to be associated with this crap.
Angel of Darkness is just overall not a good game. You may have noticed I never got quite as angry when I talked about other bad games like Ghostbusters 2 or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's because with something like Ghostbusters, I expect it to be bad. It's very rare for a movie to video game adaptation to go smoothly, and it definitely goes horribly wrong with Ghostbusters, and Jekyll and Hyde for that matter. With the Tomb Raider series, I know that they can produce decent games. Granted, some of the classics weren't exactly my favorites, but other games that will come after Angel of Darkness I find are really, really good. This is exactly why I also got so angry about Castlevania 2. Well, I say angry, but I sure as hell don't show it.
Come on, I'm almost there. Oh, you son of a...
Oh yeah, I just sound infuriated, don't I?
But Angel of Darkness is just an unpleasant experience. I don't like the darker tone, I don't like the gameplay, I don't like Lara Croft, and I especially don't like that this game nearly killed the franchise. That's how bad the reception was.
And this game came out the same time as Cradle of Life? Wow, crappier and crappiest.
It's considered to be the worst Tomb Raider game of all time, and by God does it definitely show. I can appreciate Core for finally trying something different, and I do feel bad for them that after Angel of Darkness they weren't allowed to make any more Tomb Raider games, but at the same time I think they kind of brought it on themselves.
And if proving your innocence means breaking into places and shooting everything you see, I don't think you're going to be in the clear anytime soon, Lara.
Don't buy this game. Hell, don't even illegally download it. It's not worth your time and you should avoid it like the freaking plague. I give it a 4.5 out of 10, standing for Lara Croft, Men Hater.
Huh. You know, this may be the first bad game I've legitimately beaten on this channel. Well, thankfully I can safely say that the worst is over, and we still got a few more games to look at. Similar to the last video, I'm going to be reviewing 3 games in one. These games are Tomb Raider Legend, Anniversary, and Underworld. I'm Josh Smith from Reviews the Esther. You know what? I'm actually going to be changing the name of the show to make it seem more distinctive. I've been thinking that Reviews the Esther might be a bit hard to find. So ladies and gentlemen, my name's Josh Smith, I praise the treasure, and I pick apart the trash. See you next time.
What exactly is the Angel of Darkness anyway?